All right, great.
Great.
So, so the meeting objectives today for the project for this meeting is to introduce you to the project and the site, which is off of East Street, to gather input from you about what you might want to do with the site given the framework that the city has set out for what they think makes sense there. Learn about the look and feel of the site that might be desirable for you, and also just to gauge in general whether there's support for this project, and then to obtain some feedback on some design concepts that we'll share later with you guys. I promise that there aren't very many slides with text on them, bullet point text on them, so we're going to try not to bore you, but there are a couple in the beginning. So the agenda today, I'm going to explain the Zoom tools and the meeting format. We're going to have a poll, which will come up on the screen, and please do fill it out, and you'll see the results instantly. There's going to be a welcome to the meeting by Jeff. Then there'll be a presentation by myself about the project and the site. We'll have another poll. We'll do some Q&A via chat, which means that Jeff will be reading your comments and then we'll be answering them. There'll be a presentation of design concepts by Dan Shaw. Then a discussion, again, probably using chat depending on how many people we have left at that point in the meeting. Possibly we'll do it by video if we have a small enough number and it seems manageable. And then a final poll, and the meeting will be over. I expect this is probably going to take an hour and a half to get through. We have a lot of information and stuff to show you. So usually these meetings in person are an hour and a half to 2 hours. So imagine this will be about the same. Okay, so how to use Zoom. You probably have, if you're signed in through a desktop, you probably have a window that looks something like this, with a bunch of images of people on it. And then down at the bottom, there's a menu for various options. Your options are going to be less than yours because you're not the host of the meeting, less than mine because you're not the host of the meeting. If you're not seeing those options, the tools at the bottom of the screen, take your mouse and mouse over that to bring up the tools. And likewise on the top, if you're not seeing the thing that says speaker view, mouse over that to bring that up. Okay, so if you mouse over the top, you bring up speaker view. There are two views there. There's speaker view and gallery view. I recommend speaker view for this because for the most part, you're going to be seeing a screen share. And there isn't so much interaction between the participants in this meeting. And one note, these instructions are for the desktop app. So if you're using your iPhone or something else, you're going to have a different view. In general, if you're on an iPhone, there's a button on the bottom right that says more, and pretty much all of these options are there. So on the bottom, click that to expand the participants tray. I recommend that you do that now. So click where it says participants, and that'll open a little sidebar. And you can use the buttons there to give us feedback. So there's things like go slower, go faster. There's a raise hand function there that's really important. That lets us know that you have something you want to say. Although again, I encourage you to use the chat function instead of raising your hand. Okay, so that's the participants tray. Click on the chat button to expand the chat tray that appears down at the bottom there. If you're on an iPhone, it's going to look different again. Please send your chats to Jeff, and he'll respond to you, or save them up for later on for Dan and I to So I encourage you all to test that out now so that you know how to use it. And moving on. Okay, so the project scope started in January, and we're going to June 2020. So the city of East Hampton hired Dodson and Flinker, which is the firm that I work for. I'm Dylan Sussman. We also hired Dan Shaw. I work with Dan Shaw, who is also there on your screen. Dan, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a landscape architect. I'm co-workers with Dylan at Dodson and Flinker. And later on in the presentation, I'll be showing design concepts for this site that we've come up with.
Great. Okay. So January to June, the items that we're doing are site analysis, which is basically looking at the site in detail and figuring out what's important about it, what are its features, and then how those might impact design or future maintenance and so on. Developing design concepts, sharing the work in progress and getting feedback. Originally, that was supposed to be an in-person meeting and a site tour, site walk today. Obviously, life has changed a lot since we first made the scope. But we're excited to see how this works in virtual format. So we're going to share some work today. We're going to revise the design concept that seems to be the preferred one after this meeting. It may be a combination of ideas that come out of this meeting that become the preferred design concept. We're going to develop a rough budget estimate for the project, and then we're going to share the final concept design back with people of East Hampton and whoever else is interested. And then after the project ends in July, the city will apply for grant funding for additional design and construction money. So that's the plan. Jeff, do you want to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just give a chance for Jeff to introduce anything else about the city and its goals and how this project came to be.
Thank you. Before we get started, I just want to make sure, I don't see any chats yet. So I just want to maybe just ask as I'm talking, just for people to put it, if you want to, just put test in there. I just want to make sure that the chat is functioning like we hope it is. I have, yes, okay, I see some howdy. Okay, I'm seeing some stuff. So this is good. Test, test, test. Good. Hi, Jeff. Yes, okay. All right, so I just want to make sure that that's kind of functioning a little bit. The second thing I want to do is I just really want to acknowledge that we're in a really unique time. The evolution in the past couple weeks related to COVID-19 has just been, it's just been kind of wild and crazy. And I know it's challenging and it's really serious. So we had a couple of conversations about canceling all of this work. And what we tried to do instead was to try to use this electronic platform that we have just to start the project. If you haven't used Zoom yet, a lot of people are using it. And we just wanted to start the conversation. And as of right now, from what I can tell, there's over 30 people on this call, which is fantastic. And just for reference, what we're going to try to do is we're going to record this meeting, and we're going to use East Hampton Media is going to share it back out, and we're also going to share it back out on Facebook at a minimum, so that other people can access the same video and can watch this and participate. So this is not the singular event that people will learn about the project. From a planning perspective, part of this is your input, and that's really important. The other part of it is just making sure that people know that we're talking about this. So this is a project that's been underway for a little over a year. We, in a partnership with the Kestrel Land Trust and Pascomic Conservation Trust, acquired 2 parcels together that equals 23 acres on the side of Mount Tom off of East Street. So the beauty of this project is that this property in this area has been identified for over 20 years. Through our master plan and through various open space plans, this property in this area have been identified as really important. And so, last 2 years ago, we started looking at options, and then the property owner actually pursued a subdivision. And this could have been, 9 high-end housing lots if the city and its partners didn't kind of try to act. So through that process, we did have a cooperative property owner who gave the city and Kestrel and Pascomic some time to work out, the logistics of trying to acquire the property. And then last year we applied for funding through the state through the park program, which is specifically designed to build parks, create trails, and create public access. And so they awarded East Hampton $400,000 towards the acquisition of both the properties. And now we finished that process last June. And since then, we've been trying to maintain momentum towards creating some kind of publicly accessible trail network on the property. One of the really important things for me to mention is that that park grant program also funds design and construction. So this process that we're in now is a project that's funded by the Community Preservation Act to make sure that we have had some community input and can come up with a general concept for the property. And once we've done that, then we have we've done our work to come up with a plan. And then the goal at the moment is to apply for the park grant funding again in July. So we have a couple months still to formulate a plan and gather some additional input. And then we are aiming to submit for funding in July. There's obviously no guarantee that we would get that funding, but once we've completed this process, we'll have a plan and we'll have a vision for the property that we could use for other funding sources as well. As Dylan introduced, this property will provide East Hampton with direct access to Mount Tom. It really provides a unique opportunity for us to create a new public space in East Hampton. And through the discussions early on, the primary overarching goal was that given the site characteristics, we can offer access to a wide range of people. So the concept generally that we have is that there would be a parking area that would be created off of East Street. And from that parking area, we're trying to envision a multi-use path, a path that would be able to provide people with mobility issues access to this beautiful property. And in doing that, we can open up the opportunity to a wide range of people to access the property. As you'll see in the presentation, there's a knoll at the top of the hill that provides a beautiful look out over the Oxbow. And so we're trying to open up that opportunity for as many people as possible. And then the second layer of this is the property next to the cities that the Kestrel Land Trust purchased has an opportunity for a moderate hiking loop with the possibility of going up on this knoll called Little Mountain. So it's kind of the second level of hiking opportunity that could exist there. And then the third component of this is that this is the same area that is utilized by avid hikers to access the New England Scenic Trail. And so providing access here can really create an opportunity for a wide range of people. And one of the things that we're trying to give special attention to is we want to provide access to nature to our people in East Hampton who may not be avid hikers. This is something that could be available for people who just want to get outside. They may not be the most comfortable outside, but they could get here, they could park, and they could go up to this open area and access some of our beautiful areas. So I talked about the funding strategy, and I think that's an important part. And then the last thing, the two last things I'll mention before we carry on is that this is pretty site specific. So this is really about this property and what possible uses and trails we could build here in gathering areas. I would expect that through this discussion, we might hear other input about other areas and other open space needs. And I just want to put a plug in for the fact that we are going to also be working on our open space and recreation plan overall. So for more general discussions, we've had a lot of people interested in other recreational opportunities. So some will fit within this property and some will have to be explored for other areas in town. And so that would be another discussion that we're going to pick up a little bit later this summer. So I think I've covered as much as I would want to do now. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Dylan. I just want to make sure that everyone is muted for the time being. Just to go to scroll down and make sure that you have a mute button on. just for the purpose of sound and clarity moving forward. And then we will probably use the chat function in the later section. So I just want to thank you all very much for participating in this really unique kind of first time adventure to do this electronically. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you all for coming. Looks like we've got about 38 people with us, which is really awesome. And Mike, thank you for using the thumbs up. That's helpful to see. So you all have there's some reactions buttons down at the bottom. You can use those as well. Or you can use the thumbs up under more in participants. Oops, I just gave myself thumbs down. All right, so I'm going to pick up the presentation again. And like I said, we're going to, actually I'm going to launch a poll for you guys. So you should see a poll coming up on your screen in a minute. And this is just a quick survey to find out who's on the, who's in the meeting with us and what your sort of your interests are and your level of engagement in East Hampton. This is to give us, we have a couple questions here and some questions at the end just to give us a sense of how this meeting format works compared to in-person meetings. So I'm going to give you all a minute just to fill that out. So, Chris. So there are a bunch of questions down at the bottom. So some of you may be having trouble if you haven't scrolled all the way down to the bottom to see all the questions.
And Dylan, I can imagine that if there's folks who just have this presentation on while they're going about their house doing other things, they might not be at the computer doing the poll. So the percentages haven't increased in a moment, so it might be worth closing the poll.
All right, you've got 5 seconds and then I'm going to close this poll. All right.
All right, Dylan, sorry to interject. Before you close the poll, I've gotten a question here about the chat. And the question was whether the chat option to everyone has gone away.
Yeah, you shouldn't have an option to chat to everybody. So that's the goal. And again, that's to prevent people from chatting obnoxious comment to each other, which has been happening in Zoom meetings and happened at an Amherst City Council meeting recently. That was held by Zoom, their first meeting. So,
okay, so then the chats are all coming to me and the YouTube. Okay, so if you are using the chat bar, I'm seeing it, although it does look like it comes up with the privately listed. Possibly it says privately next to it, but that's going to the 3 hosts. So that's the idea. So I just want to check. Okay, thank you.
And hopefully that's the way it's working on your end. All right, so sharing the results of the poll. So the majority of you are from East Hampton. We've got 3 people from Holyoke and 3 from Northampton and 1 from some other town in Hampshire County. You're mostly in your 40s through your 80s, about evenly split there, with a couple of younger people on hand. That's pretty typical for a planning meeting. So this is probably slightly more representative of a younger crowd than a typical planning meeting, but not much. Looks like a lot of you are pretty regular trail users, with just a small number who use them not at all or less than once a year. You guys are also pretty regular users of parks in the region, the majority using them weekly, and most of you, you're pretty evenly split between people who regularly attend planning meetings and those of you who don't. So, one of the hopes of online meetings is that we'll get a more diverse group of participants than our typical. For planning meetings, often people can't go to community meetings because they're held in the evening and they have to babysit their children, or they're working the night shift, or otherwise busy. So the hope is that meetings like this actually are better for getting more participation. All right, so I'm gonna close those poll results and move on to presentation. Okay, oops. Okay, so like Jeff said, the goals of this project are to develop a trail that's accessible to a wide range of people, to create a usable space at the top of the site, and then the site offers a really great opportunity to establish a connection to the long distance trails that's in the area, which is the New England Trail. We expect that we expect the users of the site to be your dedicated hardcore hikers who normally use the trails in the region, but we're also really gearing the design towards people with mobility impairments, families who might be pushing a stroller, older people who are less physically active than they used to be or have mobility impairments, and then just casual day hikers. So the goal here is to broaden the range of people who have access to outdoor activities. I'm going to tell you about the project site now. So you're looking at a map of East Hampton. The project site is along East Street. It's pretty close to 91 at the toe of Mount Tom. So that's Mount Tom that's running from the sort of the north of the map to the south along the east or the left side of East Hampton. Zooming in a little bit, the two properties that are highlighted in red there are the parcels that the project is focused on. As you can see, they have a small amount of access to East Street, little legs coming down to East Street, and then a bunch of backland. You'll see what it looks like in a minute. So there are two parcels. One's owned by the city of East Hampton. It's about 12 acres, I believe, and the other is owned by Kestrel Trust, and it's about 10.5 acres. And if you look at the topography on this image, so the wavy lines that you're seeing are topography, and what you can see is that there's a pretty cool little, like what's called Little Mountain. It's a little hill that's on the Kestrel Trust portion, and the gray box on the Mount Tom portion is a house that's no longer there. So two parcels, little over 20 acres in total. The Manhattan Rail Trail, you probably know, runs on the other side of East Street from this site. So there's potential, maybe in the future, to provide some sort of connection from the Manhattan Trail. From the Manhattan Trail, which would be another set of users for the project site. People maybe would want to ride their bikes and then get off and take a little hike, go for a picnic, etc. And then the New England Trail, which is a long distance trail that runs all the way from the Massachusetts, New Hampshire border down to southern Connecticut, runs through this property. So that's also used to be called the M&M Trail, or parts of it are the M&M Trail. So it runs along the backside of the Kestrel Trust property and then up into Mount Tom and beyond. So the project site, the reason I think the project site has been sort of in the eyes of East Hampton for so long is it's a really interesting place that's adjacent to the mountain and also at the intersection of a bunch of different transportation opportunities. So this is what it looks like if you're up in a drone. And you can see the part that's owned by the city of East Hampton on the right of the image, and the part that's owned by Kestrel Trust on the left of the image. East Street is in the front of the image. You see a bunch of houses fronting East Street there. And the way the property reaches down to the street, but is mostly in the back of those house lots. Little Mountain is on the left of your screen. You can see the little bump there covered by trees. There's the former house site clearing. You can just see a little bit of dirt where there used to be an in-ground pool and some cars that are parked up at the top there. I think those are there probably to do the drone photography. It's not open to the public right now. There's a gate across the driveway. So you'd have to talk to Jeff if you want to go visit. There's some power lines that are running along the backside of the property, and can show you what those look like towards the end of the site tour. So one thing that's interesting about the site is it has a mix of a number of different kind of vegetation types, which create different landscape characters, different like looks and feels and opportunities for shaping a trail or for use of the site. And that's basically because of the history of the site. So because of the way that the site has been used over time, and because it's been managed in different ways, it now has different characters throughout it. So down by East Street, at the bottom of the screen, there's a flat area next to the road. Then you move up into kind of a meadowy area that was formerly mowed and is now growing back. There are open woods behind that. And then moving over to the right, you get into some sort of forest edge area where it's, birch trees and probably sumac and that sort of thing. It's a different character than the open woods to the right. There's a successional meadow, which is an area that was formerly mowed and has not been in the recent past, so it's growing up rather quickly. And then there's what I'm calling, for lack of a better word, degraded land where there used to be a house site, which includes things like broken pavement and a big area that was had a pool on it, I believe, and now is just kind of dirt. And then over in the Kestrel Trust portion, on Little Mountain, there's more of a mature forest that's more similar to what's up on Mount Tom itself. And then lastly, there's a former driveway that runs along what I'll call the left side of the property, down to the road. And like I said, that's currently closed. It has a gate across it. It's pretty steep and it's pretty narrow. This is looking at a map of the site from the top down, right? Again, those white lines are topography. In general, it's, I think, difficult for many people to read topography, but I'm showing it to you because it's pretty important when you're trying to design an accessible trail, which has limitations on how steep the trail can be. So we have to really pay attention to the topography here, and also because the topography creates different characteristics to the place and feels to it. So where you see the topography lines, the white lines being very close together, like on Little Mountain over here where my mouse is moving, that's steeper. And where the topography lines are further apart, like where there was a house site, that's less steep. So generally, the land down towards East Street is less steep. It gets a little bit more steep in through those open woods with some bands of places that are fairly steep, and then it's flatter up where the house was, and then very steep at the top of Little Mountain. So this is that same topography, but kind of colored by how steep the slopes are. And again, this is important for this project because of the desire to create an accessible trail here. So when we say accessible trail, we're looking for something that's comfortable for all users to walk on and for people in a wheelchair to roll on. In general, the guideline for that is about a 5% slope or less. A 5% slope when you're when you're looking at it, basically looks flat. That's like, it's a slightly sloped lawn. And the majority of this site has slopes that are in the 10 to 20% range with bands that are in 20 to 30%. So this gray here is in the 20 to 30%, and Little Mountain, you're approaching, 30% and beyond. So the implications of that is if you want an accessible trail here, it's not going to take the straight route up the straight shot. It's going to have to do some meandering and some switchbacks, and there's going to be some construction in order to flatten things out. This is going back in time to 2008. So there's this aerial photo from 2008 shows what the site used to look like. And I'm showing you this again to make the point that what we see now is the result of the past land use of a place. And I think we get very attached to the way things are. And it's hard to remember that things change over time, right? And that what we're looking at is just in the land is just sort of a snapshot of change over time, change of vegetation and so on. So you can see that formerly that whole hillside that the house was on was mowed, right? You can see a little birch tree in the middle. It's a little white dot that's still there. And all of this area was formerly mowed, and there was pretty little tree cover in between the bottom of the hill and the houses closer to East Street. And likewise, the area that I said was a meadow in transition now was also pretty regularly mowed. So that's 2008, and then this is today. So switching back and forth, you can see that there's been a pretty good amount of transition of the area below the house. The tree border has been thickened up, and then there's some new trees that have grown in this, are starting to grow in this area as well. And all of that has implications for how the city might want to manage the property in the future, but also what the opportunities are for design. This is looking at just access to the site. So like I said, there's the former driveway, which is shown at the top of the screen, and then there's this flat area at the bottom of the screen. The former driveway is very steep, and it has poor visibility on East Street. There's a curve a little bit of the way towards Route 5 and 10. And also there's a large tree, and the driveway is sort of inset into a couple of hill sets. It was cut out of hills. So the visibility from that driveway is pretty poor. On the other hand, the flat area further down East Street, which is over here. So this is that flat area. It's a little bit difficult to see. There's a row of arborvitaes and then a flat area there. That flat area has much better visibility and a larger area, so it provides the opportunity for a parking area right adjacent to East Street. It's about 50 feet wide, which is suitable for basically one row of cars parked nose in. This is looking at that meadow area beyond the parking. So if you look at this image and you peer towards the Mount Thom in the background, that's where we are. There are a couple of trees in there, and it's relatively flat, although not flat, and it has open views. Moving further into the site, you get into the area of open woods, which is kind of has a unique character in that you have a lot of trees that are very similar in age. There are a lot of not brand new trees, but probably 10 to 15 to 20-year-old trees with almost no understory, right? So these woods are extremely open. You see everything around you. And so it's interesting because it's an unusual character. On the other hand, it means that you kind of get a sense of the whole site, at this part of the site all at one time. So routing the trail with switchbacks, we're going to have to figure out how to make it interesting enough for people to want to take that trail and not just cut straight through the woods. There are a couple of interesting features in this area. There's a old kind of rubble stone wall at the top of the slope. There's what appears to be a stream popping up at the base of the tree, and the image on the upper right that then goes into a culvert, it seems, that might run underneath the meadow, and who knows where it goes. And then there's a thicket of saplings that's growing up, which is also pretty cool. That's on the bottom right of your screen. So it might make sense to route the trail to see some of these features. This is coming out of the forest, so we've gone from what probably will be the parking area up through the meadow area, through the open woods, and taken a left. And in the distance there, you can see the little mountain and the clearing for the former house site. And you can get a sense of some of the bands of steeper slopes that are off to the left of the site. And so the trail options you'll see later in the presentation respond to those bands of steep slope. Is moving, say 10 or 20 feet further, you're coming out of the woods, and again, you see Little Mountain in straight ahead of you, off to sort of 3/4 to the right of your screen of the image, and you're starting to see the view to the valley beyond off to the left. Moving a little further on, you can see the pavement where there used to be a driveway. Some of that, what I'm calling the graded land off to the left, it's actually probably steeper than it looks in the picture. There's a bigger hole there than it looks like. And you can again see Little Mountain, which is it's a kind of cool and unique little knob, right? It's a compelling little thing. If you're into land, which obviously I am. This is the view from just behind the parking, the former driveway area there. And I think what's important to note about the view is, it's a great view. It definitely gives you a sense of like, you've gotten somewhere, there's something to look at. At the same time, you can see that there are starting to be trees that are growing up into that view and have potential to block it pretty quickly. So the birch that was about halfway, this white tree here that was about halfway up the slope, which is mature, is, in the summer when it has leaves, is definitely going to block the view. And then some of these, what are likely white pines that are growing up, have potential to block that view. So that means a couple of things for the design. One, if there's any kind of viewing area on the site, it probably should be at the top of the site, furthest up the slope. You might need a little bit of elevation change to get the maximum view. And then also that the hillside down below should probably be managed to prevent trees from growing to, full-size trees from growing up, which would block the view. At the bottom of the screen, just basically, if you turn around 180 degrees, what you see is this very cool oak tree. There's a big mature oak tree that's just on the backside of the site. So you're basically, the top image, you're kind of standing with your back to the trunk of that oak tree. This is what the successional meadow looks like down below the house site. So it's growing up with quite a lot of white pine, which grow quickly and very tall. And that's, typical for a successional meadow to have white pines move in quickly. There also are some juniper in there. And then this is that birch tree, which is pretty awesome, especially growing in, it's a tree that was grown in the middle of an open lawn and is now surrounded by other trees and shrubs. So it's like a remnant of what was. And it's kind of a waypoint along a potential trail for the site. This is looking from, turning around from where you were before and looking back at Mount Tom. So Little Mountain is off to the left there. you're looking up at where the house used to be, and you can see the band of kind of steep slopes where there used to be a pool. Do you all see my mouse moving? Nod your head if you can. Yes, good, okay. And then the image on the bottom shows you the area where that pool was, where there's a bunch of sort of steep eroding dirt. And I think I'm probably have mentioned this a bunch of times, and the reason I'm harping on it is because the site, as it is now, looks like this part of the site where there was a house looks like a place that kind of was damaged, right? There was some heavy equipment that came in there and probably demolished the house, and then took some stuff out, and the land hasn't been put back together again. It hasn't been, so it's not a natural place, and it's probably going to require some earth moving, at least in this part, to make it a place that feels comfortable, right? This is looking at Little Mountain. So the images the photos are taken from the backside of Little Mountain, which would be off to the left on these images, or to the north in reality. So Little Mountain it's very steep. It's like a short but run climb. You're scrambling over rocks, and there are some really cool big boulders along the way. And then when you get up to the top of it, there's a glimpse of a view of the Oxbow through the trees, at least in the winter months. In the fall, after the trees have lost their leaves. So it's a thing that compels you to want to climb it. But it's definitely not going to be accessible for, it's definitely not going to be handicap accessible to get up there. So there's a possibility there for sort of like a side destination off of the main trail. This is looking behind Little Mountain. So looking at the power lines that run down toward the Connecticut River. And then that connects, there's a connection to the New England Trail, which is the image on the bottom right, which is a much more traditional, pretty steep hike in the woods, which will bring you up to the top of Mount Tom. Okay, so that's the site. I'm gonna stop screen sharing in a second and launch another poll, and we'll do some Q&A about just the site itself and the background of the project. And then I'll turn it over to Dan to show you design concepts.
Something I wanted to add, Dylan, too, is from the outset of this project, I think all the parties involved have agreed our goal user is just people on foot, as opposed to developing mountain biking trails or anything like that. It's just pedestrian, casual hiking, non-vehicular only, just to clear that up.
Thanks. So I launched a poll. This is about how you want to use this, how you might want to use the site based on what you've seen. What kinds of things would support the use of that site? So do you think you could arrive by car and therefore need parking? Or you might want some seating to rest along the way. And then the final question is, would an accessible trail be useful to you? So I got a chat that you can't choose more than one option on question one. That's a real bummer, and that's my error. I'm sorry about that. I can end this poll and see if I can edit it to allow more than one option. And while I'm doing that, you all can chat with Jeff. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make that fix on the fly. So I encourage you to do some chatting with Jeff, and we'll get a little bit of a conversation going that way.
Great. And I've got a couple questions that I've kind of queued up here. So The last one's just a comment or observation of someone who does work with adults with developmental disabilities in group homes and day programs, and are always looking for free and accessible ways for them to experience nature. So this would be a great opportunity for the community. I think that's great. That's just a general observation. And then I've gotten a couple questions. So the grant that we hope to, we plan to apply for in July. The question is, will the grant cover the work on both the Kestrel Land Trust parcel and the East Hampton portion? So I know, we would try to do that. The bulk of the expenses will likely be creating a parking area and creating the accessible trail. And then as Dan Shaw does his presentation, there's always been a concept of creating some kind of gathering space up there. So even those three things may not be fundable in this first round. So as we go into this discussion today, we'll start talking about phasing, that there might be a couple different phases to the project. And I can see Mark from Kestrel. The city would definitely be supporting any application or any other funding sources that would also create the potentially sort of more of a hiking trail around Little Mountain. So we can cover that a little bit more as we go. After the presentation from Dan, I think we'll be able to see a little bit more of what that would look like. There's like 3 more questions. So we could all see in that first overview that there are power lines at the back of the property. So that's Eversource. And so the question is about the use of the right-of-way. And it's definitely a little tricky where we already experienced how Eversource was going through the process of maintaining lines and upgrading some of their utility lines. So they do have the ability to make some changes on that back strip. We worked, Kestrel and the city worked pretty collaboratively with Eversource on this last round. And if you have been up there, you could see from Underwood Ave was where that they built a temporary road, and that temporary road is now removed. So to kind of make it clear that people are not, that's not the way that we're going to be accessing the property. There is a little bit of a give and take with Eversource, which is that we want to be able to cross their land, their easement, to get to the New England Scenic Trail. So we're definitely in conversations with them about that part of it. I got a question about whether the site is currently open and available to walk around. It's a good question. We really had intended to do a site visit, but since all the responses to COVID-19, that's really off the table for any kind of coordinated site visit. I think generally the property could be accessed, but the thing that is lacking right now is any real safe way to park. We hope that as discussions about COVID-19 kind of settle down, that we would coordinate a site visit, sometime ideally this summer. So I know I'm not answering that question 100% directly because the Kestrel parcel, we're not sure if we want necessarily people up there just yet, but I'll circle back to that one. There was a question about how many parking spaces we've been talking about. And so I think as Dan goes into his presentation, maybe Dan can talk through that, but we did talk a little bit about possibly just roughly 8 to 10 parking spaces was a number that we had discussed. So looks like the poll popped up. So those were the questions I think I had so far. Dylan, have you been able to fix the poll?
I'm going to relaunch that poll. So there's going to be just question 1 here. I wasn't able to fix it in the previous poll, so I made a new one. So this is just the first question, and then I'm going to launch that previous poll and ask you just to ignore question 1 when you do it.
Okay, so the poll is back open. You're going to ignore question 1?
Yep. Jeff, did you answer the question about the former driveway?
No, so I was gonna wait till people take the poll, and then there are a couple more questions that pop up.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk while people are taking the poll.
Hello, can we read and think, talk all at the same time? It looks like the majority of you can see the poll. Some people can't. So Charlie Shaw, if you could tell me what, whether you can see the presentation first of all, and then what kind of way you're getting into the meeting. That might be helpful. I'm not sure how much I can troubleshoot it. It looks like the vast majority of people can see it. All right. All right, so, and then Linda.
Yeah, Dylan, I got there's another person who said they can't see the poll, and I have a lot of things going on my screen, but I don't have the poll available to observe anymore either.
Okay, interesting. I think we're having a technical glitch.
Okay.
I know that if
Actually-
I hover my mouse at the
Yes.
bottom of my screen, a list of menus pops up, but it
Yeah.
disappears if I'm not using it, just to
Okay.
allow me to see the here. So if you hover over the bottom of your screen, the polling icon might appear. You
Yes.
click on that and it pops up.
All right, well, I mean, everybody's answered the poll, it looks like, or most people, 36 out of 40 of you, so I'm gonna end the polling and share the results with you. And I apologize if you weren't able to answer it, and you're welcome to give feedback on any of this, you know, directly to Jeff Bagg after the meeting, or to chat in now. So it looks like 92% of you thought you'd want to use the site for hiking and walking, which is good because that was kind of the goal of the project. 50% thought it'd be appropriate for picnicking. 78 bird watching and nature observation. 78 a starting point for hikes and other trails. You know, I think that reflects, like we saw at the beginning, we've got a lot of people who are spending a lot of time outdoors on this meeting. My guess, I don't really know you all, but my guess is you skew more towards the outdoorsy types. Play space for me or others, 30%, seated activities, 43%, and a quarter of you thought it might be appropriate for holding events there. All right. So any other thoughts? Yes.
Thank you. There's a couple other questions that I think that I'd like to try to run through. There was a question about the material that might be used to construct the accessible trail. I think that there was a question about, you know, the concern about different materials could be more difficult to navigate than others, such as like the hard packed gravel versus pavement. And so I think as Dan goes through some of his presentation, Dan, if you could potentially just address some of that, and then at the end of the presentation from Dan, if that question hasn't been answered, we'll circle back to that. A couple others are whether there's any plans for a crosswalk across East Street. So, you know, East Street definitely presents some challenges. When we were going to do a site visit, we had reached out to Hogan Communication, which is a little bit farther down East Street towards the intersection of Route 5, and they were willing to let us park there. And leaving their property and kind of traversing towards the site, the sidewalk, you know, just ends. So we have some issues with East Street in general. The only reason I would say a crosswalk at this point probably would not be part of the project is because it would cross to the side of the street with no other sidewalk. So there have been some discussions about a little bit longer term trying to connect. There's a Pascomic parcel of land, a public space on the other side of East Street. And if there were an ability to connect from the Manhattan Rail Trail up to that Pascomic parcel and then construct a sidewalk, at that point we would consider, the sidewalk on East Street is a problem, or the lack of sidewalk is a problem. So this project as a phase one probably would not include that. There's a question about public restrooms at the top of the site, and so we did have some conversations about that. I think as Dan goes into his presentation, let's keep an eye on that and whether people think that would be potentially viable or useful. I think it's a good observation. I think there's two more, but just a question about public transportation access. So in the early phases of the project, there were discussions, and I think Garrett Stover from Pascomic was really instrumental in trying to reach out to PBTA and possibly having the Nashwauk Express be able to access the site. And so that has been discussed. I don't know that we have a firm plan yet, but the discussion about the parking area was always going to be designed to at least accommodate the Nashwauk Express bus to be able to pull in, potentially let people out and then turn around. So that is definitely something that we're thinking about. So I think that's it for now. So maybe it would be a good time. You can keep chatting as we go, but I think it would be a good time to turn it over to Dan.
Yeah, give me 1 second. So one thing on the poll, it sounds like you have to put in some answer for the first question in order to be able to close it out. So thank you, Mary Lou, for telling me that. And then also there's some chats that have come in that I think are probably coming to me only. Just again, please chat to Jeff because when we're presenting, we don't see your chats.
I think people have raised the question of whether they can chat directly to me. So I don't know what the chat option looks like, to be perfectly honest. But if you can find chat to Jeff, that's great. If not, we might have to all field them a little bit.
Okay.
We're working this out as we go.
Yeah.
And I haven't been receiving chats from folks, so I think they're probably all going to you. In my window, if I have the chat box open, at the bottom, there's a drop-down menu where it says to, and I can select somebody's name. So as long as that's set to Jeff Bagg for everyone, the questions will be going to him.
All right. And lots of people have said that they can select the host. So that's great. So just try to look for Jeff, and I'll keep facilitating the discussions through that.
All right, yeah, so some comments. There was a question about whether it made sense to repair the driveway instead of using the other area. I think the opinion of, this was before we got involved in the project, but I believe the opinion of the fire department and the police department was that it really wasn't an appropriate place for public access there. I'm assuming because of the sight lines and the steepness of the driveway. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, and we want to try to preserve the potential to get vehicles up there, but we put a gate. Even in the short time that the city owned it with Kestrel, no gate, there were people getting up there and dumping stuff. And I think if we're talking about trying to create a parking area that's suitable for people to park and access the trail, that far out of view was definitely a concern of public safety, that it would potentially just create a nuisance situation rather than something that's viable. It's a very steep, very narrow road. Only one car can go at a time. So for a lot of reasons, we ruled that out. And we want to have the potential parking area just kind of visible from East Street and not that deep into the property, so that it's something that as people are passing by, it's easily observed.
And then there was another comment that said, I'm concerned that the house next to potential parking area not have an ugly eyesore right next to it. Definitely understand that concern. And so on the one side, currently there's a big hedge or a big arborvitae, line of arborvitae. So I think they'll be fairly screened. The other side, we can look at what can be done to do screening there. Luckily, I think the people who purchased that property bought it after this project was in the woods works and were aware of it. But share that concern and we'll do what we can there. There was a question about how extensive the accessible trail component would be. That's a question we're still trying to figure out. We're trying to find the best route to take, and then from there we'll figure out how much is affordable. But the goal is to have an accessible trail from the parking area up to the flatter area at the top with the view. And then still scrolling through these comments, I think just came to me. All right, that's it. So I just want to take a second to look at these poll results and then move on to Dan's presentations, where we'll actually get to see what we think is possible here. So people thought that parking was pretty essential. 86% of you, 50% thought bike racks would be a good idea. 80% thought a trail would be useful. That aligns really closely with the number of you who want to hike there. Seating, 30% of you. Tables, 30%. Interpretive signs, a little less than half. An area for picnicking, a flat area for picnicking, about a little less than half of you. About a third of you thought a covered area would be useful to support the uses you want to have. And then there are some others there that hopefully chatted what that other would be to Jeff. And then a little over 2/3 of you thought that an accessible trail would benefit either you or other people that you know. And the remainder thought, well, maybe, we're not sure. Okay, so we're going to end this poll. I'll share the results with you, and then we'll move on to Dan's presentation. And my guess is right now Dan is getting his screen up and running.
Yeah, I'm ready to go whenever.
So far. Yep, you're all set, Dan.
Okay. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Dylan and Jeff, give me a thumbs up if you see my screen so I know that it worked. Okay. I'm going to assume it worked for everyone. So I'm going to show you design ideas we came up with for 2 possible trail routes, and then for 5 different concepts of ways to treat the former house site for a gathering space or a park-like setting. So this yellow circled area is where we're assuming parking is going to be on that access to East Street. I'm going to show there's going to be some kind of trail that zigzags up through the site, and then there's going to be a designed space up at the top. And I'm going to be showing you a series of plans that look at this area circled in red, the top half of the meadow, and the relatively flat area at the very top where the house used to be. And for the 2 trail options, I'm going to follow each one with a couple of the design options for the top of the site that, in our minds, kind of make sense with those trails. So trail option A, we're calling the shrub meadow maze. And this would be, it would start down, I'm assuming you can see my cursor, it would start down at the parking area and meander uphill through the meadow, through the edge of the woods, and then maneuver skirting across the slope into the meadow as quickly as possible. Since the meadow is going to be an easier place to construct a trail because there aren't trees and obstacles in the way as much there, you can switch back and zigzag through there. This would be maintained, the meadow space would be mowed initially, and you'd clear the successional pine trees that are going to eventually block the view, and then plant native shrubs and create an appropriate meadow habitat for this area and maintain it that way so that you have a view over top of it. And then the value of a trail going this way when you're up in the meadow part of it is you get these peaks between shrubs. You could see where you're going sometimes, and other times the meadow landscape would kind of conceal and then reveal the path, and it could be a little bit maze-like, and sometimes you would see a view out to the landscape up above. The drawback of it compared to the other route I'll show you later is that the arrival up to the top of the hill would be gradual. You would kind of see your destination a little bit the whole time you're going there, and there wouldn't be as big of a reveal at the end. But again, it could be a cost-effective, easy to implement option. So the first park design option that goes along with that, we're calling the basic lawn. And we're starting simple with this idea to say cheapest, lowest cost intervention is you just get the bulldozers out and smooth out that house site where it's a little bit wrecked right now and there's a kind of depression where the pool was. Just smooth out the contours to create one level plane and seed it with grass and treat it like a picnicking lawn. And maintenance-wise, it would just be up to the city to decide how much of this they want to mow as a lawn picnic space and how much of it they just let go into a more loosely maintained meadow. So it's kind of a soft approach that way. The next image I'm going to show is a perspective drawn from the corner of the site where that arrow just appeared, looking down to the north towards Little Mountain. And each plan I'm going to show is going to have a perspective drawn from that same angle, just for consistency, so you can compare. But this is what a lawn up there might look like. The idea was a space like this would allow picnic blankets to be spread out. You could kind of run and play on this, but it would be basic. It would have a decent view, easy to maintain. The drawback of this, again, is that this kind of design, while cost-effective, might not take full advantage of this really unique site's full potential, but maybe it's sensible as a phase one of a larger, more ambitious design that comes along in stages. The second design idea, and by the way, with all of these design ideas, it's not like we're going to commit to one of these today and go forward exactly as shown. We're putting feelers out here, and probably we'll see how you all respond and what makes sense to you, and we'll combine elements from all of these into a final design that we all agree makes the most sense. So the second option we're calling the treehouse, where it's basically the same idea as the lawn with the meadow walk, and there'd be one more intensive intervention right at the top of the site. The idea would be to build like a structure of some kind. Maybe it's literally a treehouse in that big oak tree with, you know, rubber bumpers that take good care of the tree, or maybe it's a boardwalk that ramps up and gets you 5 to 8 feet above grade. Just because when you're on the site today, if any of you end up with a chance to explore it, you can sense that if you could just get up a few feet higher, the view would go from being pretty good to being really good. So the idea here is still treat the site design in a really basic way, but put more investment into like a structure at the high point of the site that lets you get up, get some views. Maybe it could be designed for some fun features like a bird blind, a nature viewing structure. Maybe it's a tree house, maybe it's a picnic shelter with a roof. So I'm kind of showing a loose combination of ideas like that in this drawing. The downside is that the treehouse idea here would be a little more costly to maintain because there'd be the intricacies and nooks and crannies, the vandalism issues you'd have to protect against, and it would certainly be more expensive to build than the basic lawn idea. But the benefit is creating a structure on top of the hill like this would, and I'm suggesting it's up to the side so it doesn't dominate the site too much, but it gets to the high point. It would provide a landmark and a really memorable destination as you come to this high point. That's also the juncture to trails beyond, to Little Mountain, to the DCR trails. So then the other trail option that the next couple of design ideas are going to be based on, the first half of it is really similar to the other one that I just shared with you. And I don't think I mentioned it before. The way it's color-coded, the orange line is what would be the accessible trail, and these gray lines would be more rustic hiking trails that don't have to adhere to the same mild slopes and surfacing requirements. Surfacing, on that note, would there aren't really strict regulations for what's considered an accessible trail. There's more of guidelines. So to the extent feasible, if you can have a stable surface that's hard packed and doesn't provide tripping hazards and won't erode. So it's more of qualitative guidelines that the Architectural Access Board, what is it? The ABA provides guidelines for outdoor hiking, accessible trails. We'd probably be looking at something like stone dust that's well compacted, or maybe stabilized stone dust that has a binder in it, so it behaves a little more like asphalt. That's a little more expensive to build, but certainly doable. In some places you see asphalt trails just because you build it once and then they hold up for a long, long time, and eventually roots heave it up and you have to do some repair. But we'd be looking at some kind of stable surface. An accessible trail wouldn't be earth or anything rough. You'd have to be able to roll a wheelchair or a stroller over it with low maintenance.
Dan, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. So for those of you who have experience using accessible trails, there's Muttersfield in East Hampton, there's the Fort River Trail in Hadley. So feel free to chat your experience with those surface types. They're both similar. So feel free to chat your experience with those so we get a little bit of information about what it's like to use them, especially if you're somebody who uses a wheelchair or a walker or a cane or has some other mobility impairment. Thanks.
So this trail option B that is on screen right now, the first half of it is the same as the first option I showed because there's only a few basic ways of entering the site from the parking area while still getting uphill quickly enough, traversing the contours, because again, we can't just straight shot up that steep hill. In this case, rather than taking the easy path through the meadow, this option explores taking more full advantage of all of the environments that this site offers by switching back through the edges of the woods more as it works uphill. And I've mapped a few of the different types of woods environments that you would go through. So Dylan showed that the woods over here have no understory and it's really, really clear and open. So rather than piling all the switchbacks right in front of your view, the idea is skirting around the edge of the woods to create more of a sense of depth, but you're also passing through the edge conditions of the woods a little bit more. The edges of woods tend to have more of a floor to ceiling variety of plants and things like that. And there's saplings, there's a clearing, a stone wall, and a variety of features this path would pass through. And then when it's at the top of the hill up here, you would emerge out of the woods and see Little Mountain for the first time all at once, and you would reorient looking out to the northwest and you would see the distant horizon all at once. So this path would be a little trickier to construct because you're dodging trees by going through the woods, but we think it's probably doable, and you would get a big reveal at the end when you come to this gathering space, and along the way you would have maybe a richer walk by passing through a variety of woods environments in and out of the edge of the woods. So the next 3 design concepts I'm going to show plug into this trail, although we can mix and match any of these, but that's just what we had in mind when we started envisioning this. So this design we're calling the mounds. The idea is we already are going to have to do some reworking of the site up here anyway, because if you left it as is, it's this haphazard abandoned site with a pit where the swimming pool used to be. So we have to get some bulldozers out and rework the contour lines to make this site usable. So if we're already doing that, could we explore creating a sculptural place that's playful out of this site? So this idea we're calling the mounds resculpts the currently misshapen site into a space that would be kind of fun and artistic and interpretive. It would be a space for kids to run around and play, you know, without building a playground. You suggest play by sculpting these playful hills that kids are running up and down. People can gather in the nooks between these little miniature mounds you'd be making, or on top of them, so you don't have to wait in line for the person who's taking their Instagram selfie on top of the one viewing platform. Rather, by creating a bunch of mounds, there's lots of little high points different groups can gather on and kind of hang out for a while, enjoying the high view that way. And you could organize it to create a couple of larger spaces in between these playful mounds. And the idea would be designing the whole site rather than just putting like a viewing platform in one place. Designing the whole topography of the site can have some effects. Like the goal with a design like this would be to create the illusion that little mountain in the background there is part of the site. Maybe it reads as just the biggest of all of these mounds, but you feel drawn to meander between all these and climb up the mountain. You could utilize a space like this in any number of ways. You could have public art up here. There's an artist residency program that the New England Trail hosts. So every year they have a resident artist who walks the trails and creates interpretive art, like installation art and things like this. And since this is a site that would be right off the New England Trail, maybe you could have uses like that. Or the city of East Hampton with its public arts programs could do something. Or these scribbly structures I drew here, maybe these represent like a disc golf course, you know? So there's different ways you could interpret a playful site like this and put things in it. The benefit of a design like this is it would be relatively cost effective for what you would get out of it, because you're regrading the site anyway. So without creating something that requires a lot of maintenance, this would just require mowing on the slopes a few times a year. You could get a lot out of it. The next design we're calling the Rolling Hills, and it's a really similar idea as the really playful design I just shared, the mounds. This would take that same principle of designing the entire site by sculpting the earthwork, but it would take a different approach to it, where instead of being as interpretive and open-ended and playful like that one was, this one would invite specific uses the way the land is shaped. So by creating a ridge, a berm up at the very top of the site, that would be achieving that same effect as the treehouse idea in the first design without the cost and the maintenance required. You just create like a backdrop to that encircles the whole site. And then a level area beneath that, the picnic lawn, would be flat and still kind of up so you could have a view. And then as we go down the hill, creating a bowl that would imply gathering if a group wanted to sit around and have an event or something like that. And then you could have some of that playful sculpting of earthwork around the edges to shape spaces. But the idea with this is that you would have more of a picturesque quality. This kind of design approach would, again, try to tie in Little Mountain and the hills beyond, but it would make those features look like they're a natural continuation of a rolling hillside. And in that way, you'd see the paths meandering through, and you would see where the trailheads are, and it would be clear where to enter the woods beyond. And we would try to design the site to include all of that. This, again, would be pretty low maintenance and relatively cost effective. You basically package in, while you're doing the earthwork to repair the site, just sculpt it into these terraces and hillsides and things that would just be seeded with grass, really easy to maintain, but they would allow a variety of uses on the site without a big intervention. This final design concept, this we're calling the event space. This, I'm going to toggle back and forth between these. This would be the same topography, the same bones as this design I just showed, only it would accommodate larger gatherings and larger group activities by adding a paved plaza. So we would kind of reconstruct and repair that driveway to work with the site design and not just be that straight line, but kind of work to create the sense of place. And then have a paved terrace up at the top. We'd still have a viewing mound, but we'd add some details like a stone seating wall that you could sit on, a structure of some kind. It could be a picnic pavilion with a roof covering. Maybe it's a public restroom, some kind of building that frames the view when you arrive from the trail. We're not putting a building right smack dab in the middle of the site. We're shaping the site to be usable and then framing the entrance with a structure. And, you know, you could have, by having a paved terrace and things like this, you could have a large gathering up here. Now, the question would be, does it make sense, or is it even possible to have like a music festival up here? That might not be realistic if there's only going to be 8 to 12 parking spaces that we can fit down below. but we wanted to show this image anyway, just to kind of get us thinking about the site in all kinds of different ways. You know, you could have a vehicle access up here, and maybe it's not a music festival, maybe it's like a smaller wedding that a smaller, medium-sized group plans ahead how to use. And so that's it. So we wanted to gauge your response to these, and we drew these different options to represent different ways of looking at the site, different ways of thinking of the site. And I think Dylan set up a poll to gauge which ones spoke to you, which ones you liked the best. And we'd like to hear reactions from you specifically. If you liked one of them, we want to know which one or ones you liked, but we want to know more importantly why you liked these different ideas, since the design that we make going forward will synthesize elements most likely from all of these based on what we hear from you.
So I launched that poll. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the poll, people.
And let me see. Do I have to stop sharing my screen?
You may have to stop sharing your screen for people to be able to see it.
And I think if other people don't see it yet, you may have to go down to the menu bar at the bottom and click on polls. That's how I'm having to access it at the moment.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Nobody's seeing it. I'm going to relaunch it. Can you see it now? Hey, I got a lot of thumbs up. It's amazing how much we can communicate with thumbs up and thumbs down.
I don't know. Would it be helpful if I tried to, screen share again and have those images up while people are taking the poll?
Yeah.
I might try it. If this derails everything and you suddenly can't see your poll anymore, let us know. But I'm going to share my screen with you again and just put those images up. I think it's possible for you to, even if the poll disappeared, I think if you on my screen, if I hover to the top of the screen, now that I'm screen sharing, the menu appears and I can click polls and the poll pops up again. So that works for all of you too.
And the other option might be if the poll consumes the whole screen, if you hit the middle square, it will minimize it a little bit.
And I think I mentioned it. We're interested in your thoughts about these different ideas. If you could write your comments. I think we're still having you write to Jeff. Any specific ideas you want to share about why you liked certain ideas, or things that we missed, that like additional ideas that you think we should consider. So just write a few lines to Jeff about that.
Yeah, I mean, the poll gives us a rough sense of where people fall, but what we really care about is what matters about these designs to you. How do you think the different designs would shape your use of the space or other people's use of the space? And what you think is appropriate here or not appropriate here. So far, about half of you have responded, so we'll give a little bit more time for people to respond. And those of you who have responded, please overwhelm Jeff with chat comments.
Because we'll digest it later. You can ramble as much as you want. We'll just, even if we don't address it right now, we'll be reading it as we consider what to do next.
We'll be saving the chat, and so we'll be able to look at it all later as well.
People are doing a good job. I'm definitely getting some chat comments over here.
Nice. I think it was probably obvious, but I kind of didn't mention, we were trying to think of ways to design the site that require low maintenance just because it's up out of the way. It's not visible from the street. So you think of places you find when you get to the summit of a mountain or something like that, these designed environments that accommodate groups to come and gather and do things, but aren't like a park you would find in downtown Northampton, for instance, since it's going to be exposed to the elements and left alone. We're trying to find ways to create an appropriate, inspiring place here without relying on a lot of fussy details that will require an unrealistic amount of maintenance.
All right. I think probably everybody who has who's going to respond to the poll has responded to the poll. If you are still working on it, please chat to me and let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to close it out. All right. I'm going to end the polling and share the results with you. So in terms of just what we see in the poll, and then we'll go through the chat stuff afterwards, It looks like there's a pretty strong preference for the woods walk with the dramatic reveal trail, and a preference for the rolling hills, although not quite as strong, with also people liking the mounds and the treehouse approach, and then less for the basic lawn and the event space. So I think all of those options are kind of, they're in the middle of the range from very mid to maximal.
Dylan, I did get one quick comment that because Dan is still sharing a screen that the poll didn't come up again.
Okay, Dan, stopping sharing?
I just saw that one pop up.
Sure. Yeah, I'll stop sharing. I think even when screen sharing is happening, if you hover your mouse to the top of your screen, the menu appears. But I think everyone's had time to look at it now, so I'll just stop screen sharing for now. If folks want to see those images again, in a few minutes, let us know and we can resume screen sharing.
Can you all see the poll results now? I'm getting a no. Okay.
Getting no's.
I can help you with that.
Okay.
So you're now seeing my screen, so you're getting a bit of a double image there, but you should be able to see the poll results up on my screen. Are you seeing that now? Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. So strong preference for the woods walk trail. The rolling hills got the most votes, but close behind it were the mounds and the treehouse. The majority of you think the project is headed in the right direction, or very much headed in the right direction. The online meeting format's about the same as an in-person meeting, or better than an in-person meeting. Small number of you thought it was not as effective. And 100% of you said you would attend another virtual community meeting.
Woohoo!
Great, because we may have to do it like this for a while. And we all hope that's not the case. I look forward to seeing you all in person sometime, but this may be where we are for a little while. So, Jeff, do you want to get into any comments?
Yes. There's a lot. It's all good. I just want to, I think, never done this before. So I think I'm going to just kind of go through them really quick. And it's not to diminish the content of them in any way, but I think that way we can get a sense of what people were commenting on. It's taking me a minute to reconfigure my screen so I can read them all. So, Dylan and I did talk just briefly that since this is the first virtual meeting we have, we're going to try to stick to the chat. There is a real concern about the ability for someone to jump into this meeting and not be invited. And so we want to keep this format for a little bit longer. Next time we could probably try to facilitate actual comments and video, but I think for now we're just going to continue with this format for a little bit. So there was a comment on the surface of the trails. The loose gravel and similar things could be hazards. It has to be maintained. We want to make sure that it's not going to be, overgrown. As I scroll down here, there's a question about, really, it's difficult without seeing the site. How steep are we talking about here? And I think it's something that once we were a bit able to go out to the site and observe the potential path, it's all, and Dan, you can correct me, but it's all around 5% or so. There might be smaller sections that will go steeper, but it's actually designed to be something that people could potentially accommodate in a non-powered wheelchair. I mean, it would be, no one's saying that it would be flat, but it would be designed to be something that is reasonably accommodating. I'm just scrolling down. There was an observation that at Mutter's Field, a combination of surfaces worked best. So there's stone dust and some paved areas that are really subject to erosion. Maybe enhanced stone dust would resist it. There's a question about like a permaculture garden that maybe community run, or a pollinator garden. And that's something that I'll just touch on really quick, is that there's also the potential to deal with climate change and sustainability. So that is, that's something that the state funding programs would like to see, the ability to capture water, filter water, or to plant trees, or to create, an example, like a learning rain garden, or even interpretive science in some areas. Somebody really liked the shrub maze. Somebody before did acknowledge that mazes in general are intended to kind of trick people. So if we did do a maze-like structure, the signage would be really important. The treehouse, someone liked the treehouse and the mounds, maybe a combination of the two. Not much of a fan of the asphalt, want to keep it more natural. Love the mounds and how they tie in with Little Mountain and are open to use for people, kind of interpretation. There's a love for the way it could appeal to children without necessarily a play structure. The treehouse and mounds to climb up and down would make it family friendly. And previously there was a question about, if we follow the accessibility model, that if you do have a treehouse, obviously that's not necessarily accessible. So maybe to have an accompanying accessible play structure, which is fairly commonplace these days. Smaller event space, smaller than shown. Natural playscapes and picnic spots are good. Like to see the treatment of successional shrub area that would retain some of its value for bird species. More event space is not really needed in town, so we have Mill Pond Live and Nonotuck, which already offer that. The treehouse is a really cool idea. Scrolling, unlike anything else in the area. The Rolling Hills feels the most natural while promoting the best qualities of the site. Something about the New England Trails Artist in Residence program and treating the landscape as a collaborative community space was good. The design features are creative and honor the nature while inviting humans. Someone likes them all except the event space. There are other outdoor parks for big events and gatherings. I think the lack of parking will be the biggest hurdle for an event space. The mounds seem creative and unique, and might invite more play and exploration than the Rolling Hills. Let's see. Not looking at a music festival per se, but maybe for smaller events or gatherings, there could be a need for security at some level, given the residences in the proximity. Some Someone said that they didn't really like the treehouse because of vandalism. There's reference to Scott's Tower in Holyoke. The successional habitat is rare and waning in Massachusetts, and this would be a perfect opportunity to take the degraded habitat and convert it. So we talked about that. There is this element that down the hill, the city would have to be embarking on some kind of maintenance plan for some of the areas. B and B2 have greater emotional impact. The treehouse is exciting, less interested in the event space. I'm almost done, by the way. Actually, no, I'm not. There's a ton. Concerned about wildlife. I'm going to scroll. I just scrolled down. Benches would be good. Preference for nature-based rather than events-based. Dogs may need to be addressed, at some point in terms of whether they're allowed or not allowed. And that, one more. Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate this. I feel like I'm rambling, but this is great feedback, and I think it was really helpful. I think I covered at least generally some of them. There's a question about getting a copy of the presentation, so we did address that. We can have a PowerPoint that would get posted on the website, and then we're going to replay the video and make that available. And then Dylan, as part of the closing up, comments, but we will have another either in-person meeting or another one of these to explore how you've interpreted this information, correct?
Yeah, I think we'll have a meeting we're going to go back and refine the designs after we've looked at all the comments and the polls and talked more with Jeff and sort of the other other project partners like Mark Walmsley from Kestrel Trust, who's on this meeting. And so we'll refine the design, and then I think we'll share that with the public at another meeting.
So did you have, so this is great. I really want to thank everyone for doing this. This was, important that we try to keep the project conversation going, because again, we have the hope to be applying for funding in July. So this is really important. I appreciate the fact that everyone kind of participated despite everything that's going on. It is going to be important, I think, as we move forward through the next couple months, that, it is a good time to plan and continue to plan for things. I have a great deal of optimism about this project and a couple other projects that we're working on in town. And the quick example I'll just note, because it really kind of resonated with me, was that if you've been on the Manhattan Rail Trail, it went through a large expansion in 2010, and or approximately 2010. God, I hope I'm right. But the bridge over Route 10 into the bridge, it connected East Hampton to Northampton via the Steel Bridge. That was planned for during the 2008-2009 recession. And what happened was that there was then the stimulus package that was intended to kind of help lift everyone out of that recession. That's what the funding was used to construct that bridge. So there are a lot of kind of crazy news and information out there about what's happening, but if we're ready and we have a plan, if for some reason we're not funded in July, we'll keep trying. And with this plan in place, it gives us the kind of shovel-ready project that is really useful for funding. So the effort now is well worth it. So that was my just kind of real quick anecdote about good time to plan could be now. So Dylan or Dan, is there anything else that we should do to close this up?
No, I think we're all set. I just want to thank you all for joining us and spending the time with us. It's always a real honor and a privilege to work on a community project, and especially when it's in the town next to us, and I can envision going there and bringing my kids there. And hope to see you all there in person.
One more, sorry. So the question was how can people continue to follow up or provide more comments? So I think the best way at the moment would be by email. So we'll figure out how to message this out more broadly, but the planning department has a general mailbox. It's planning@easthamptonma.gov. And so again, it's planning@easthamptonma.gov. So if people want to continue to look at the video or the presentation as it comes available and provide more comments on, we're definitely welcome to receive that. Project is going to continue on for a couple more months, so that's fine. And when in the messaging that we put out, we'll put that email in there as well for people to continue to chime in if they want to. There it is on the chat bar. Okay.
All right, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Round of applause for everybody to do this, and we really appreciate it.
You all stuck with it.
Have a lovely Saturday.
You too. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Jeff, remember to save your chat.
Okay.
It's like a race to who can get off here quickest. We got 3 people still with us.
Okay. I'm going to leave the meeting as well. I just wasn't sure if I was going to lose my chat if I did that.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting now.
Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, all from the comfort of our homes. Peter. Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. Ooh.
Yeah.
I got to end this recording.